Share screen.
I got it. So I think it's recording now. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming out to talk a little bit more about some of the resources that are at the university. We find that there seems to be not a lot of transparency with the resources that exist at the university and beyond. And here's the thing, a lot of mental health resources get kind of complicated, you know what I mean? And so it's a lot easier for people to reach out to mental health resources kind of if they know, you know, what to expect from the resources, and exactly how to access them. Because I know I've said this a bunch of times, but like when I'm looking for a therapist, I'm like kind of looking for a reason to not to click out of the window or something like that. Because if I view it as a complex process, especially when it comes to mental health, I may not want to reach out. So hopefully this workshop can kind of shed some light on some of the resources so that you guys know just how to access them, what to expect when you reach out to resources, you know, whether it be for yourself or for people that you know. So this, of course, isn't an exhaustive list of the resources. These are just some of the popular resources that exist out there, not only in the community, but on campus as well. And there will be some, you know, there are some caveats to each of the resources, but you know, this is more so an awareness event, making sure people are aware of the resources, and then everybody can come to their conclusions about if a resource is right for you. You know, of course, we always want people to reach out to mental health resources because that's, you know, the first step, and it's a really brave decision for you and also for your loved ones. So we're just gonna kind of get really into it. If you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to plug it in the chat. And at the end, we're gonna be sticking around for some questions. So first up, Colin, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So, all right. So first, we want to start off, of course, with the counseling center. I put a picture of it here. This is the Turner Student Services Building on John Street, kind of like behind Joe's, I guess, like on the other side of the street. So the counseling center is kind of at the forefront for university mental health resources. What the counseling center does can be divided into 4 sections. So you have clinical services, crisis management, education, and outreach. So for clinical, it provides counseling to students directly in order to help bolster psychological and emotional needs on campus for students and faculty. This can come in the form of individual counseling or group counseling. The counseling center also does referrals to private therapy and specialized assessments for learning disabilities and mental health concerns. On the side of outreach and education, the counseling center offers lessons to train skills that are helpful as students, like mindfulness, focus, managing test anxiety, and overcoming perfectionism.
All right, and now that we have kind of like an overview of what the counseling center does, I thought it'd be nice to go in a little bit more in depth into how to access some of those resources and to like learn more about them. So what I would recommend, if for students who maybe don't have a really good idea on what they need or what they want, if they just want to research into it a little bit, then just go into the counseling center website, which I have the QR code there and also the URL. And so the website has a lot of like great resources. Another option would be just calling into the counseling center and just asking your question there, because then they might be able to ask follow-up questions and kind of direct you towards the resources that you might need a little bit more efficiently than if you're just like browsing through the website. But that being said, the website has a lot of great resources and it's pretty easy to navigate. Like Colin was kind of mentioning, they have like events and workshops, self-help brochures. The workshops cover things from like academic stress, and they sometimes have events like art therapy. They also have free cognito suicide training or suicide prevention training, which can be useful for students just wanting to be better trained in their community, just to deal with these kinds of problems and recognize signs of mental illness. Um, but once students are maybe more sure about like what they want, like if they want to sign up for counseling, um, what that looks like is calling into the counseling center very early in the morning. So the hours are 7:50 to 5 p.m. But they would want to call at as soon as it opens around like 7:50, because the appointments fill up really fast, and they don't do appointments like super far in advance. So yeah, basically they might be on hold for a few minutes, but yeah, the counseling center recommends just staying on hold and waiting, and eventually you'll be connected with someone who can get an appointment for you. Um, and for students who want to or who are in a little bit more of an urgent situation where they need like emergency services, then calling any time of day or um, after hours is also like a good way to get that help that you need. Because even if they can't fill out like a counseling appointment, they will have resources available. They have psychologists on standby for this sort of thing, and they have like plenty of connections to other resources that will help. So yeah, what can people expect from like the first appointment? They'll basically just be going through a lot of questions and kind of getting acquainted with like the student's needs, and trying to like build that connection that's gonna lead to like making decisions going forward and like what type of treatment and help and counseling that they'll need. um, so another thing to keep in mind, kind of a caveat to um, all the helpfulness of the counseling center, is that it is time limited, um, and most students actually only get 4 to 6 appointments, because they are understaffed and there is like way more need than they have like resources available. Um, that being said, it is still worth it for many students, but usually, yeah, they don't go past like one semester. Yeah, and another thing just to keep in mind for students is that it is like a very vulnerable experience to call into the counseling center, but at the end of the day, like it's going to be worth it. And just like expecting that vulnerability and to feel that way and feel a little bit awkward at first, I think helps prepare mentally. Um, and that passes as students get more comfortable talking about certain things. So, and the last point I'll hit on is like the counseling center offering referrals outside of the counseling center. So even though they are time limited, once the students hit that time period when the counselor kind of decides that maybe it's time to find something else, um, then they can help you figure out like what types of services are available in the community and kind of like what your insurance will allow for. Um, and on top of that, the counseling center also offers group therapy, which can be a lot longer term than individual therapy. So we're talking students can have like several semesters of group therapy help. So yeah, and hit us up if you have any more questions.
Yeah, and kind of one more thing with the counseling center too. You know, with their assessments, they will also like, you'll fill out a questionnaire before you go into your first appointment, and they'll kind of pair you with somebody based on your needs. And they also do have a staff roster on their website. So if you do want to kind of switch which person you're seeing, that's something that could definitely happen. I know that that's something that I did once because I didn't think that was addressing my needs. And so, if you feel more comfortable with someone or their therapy orientation, then, definitely feel free to look at their staff roster and see if they can move you around a little bit.
Right, so COVID-19 has come along and kind of shaken up a few things at the counseling center, but it is still open, and Jack previously mentioned like an emergency number. However, the counseling center is only available to students for like therapeutic purposes to students within Illinois to receive telehealth services. However, you can definitely ask for a phone consultation for students out of states. It's not technically counted as like a session, but it will allow students to speak with a counselor who will provide some like support or assistance or refer them to somebody outside the counseling center to get treatment. They also have workshops that are open to anybody. They're Tuesdays at 7. They go over a variety of topics there, anything from like mindfulness to meditation to like a discussion about eating disorders. If they recommended that if somebody needs to speak to like urgently to somebody after hours, that they should please call the Rosencrantz crisis line at the number below. And obviously there are a few limitations to this. First of all, being not in person is not, like it's a different sort of experience than being in person within like at the counseling center. But then also they're like students who are outside of Illinois can't receive help from the counseling center. And of course, there are limited number of sessions provided by the counseling center. So yeah.
So I'll talk about McKinley. They have a lot more resources than I originally thought before I did my research. But they have a staff that includes psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, but they have a limited psychiatry services available. And that's mainly through referral from their primary caregivers. And those services provide assessment and recommendations for subsequent treatment for a variety of emotional and behavior difficulties. And their acute assessment is available 8 to 4 p.m. on weekdays for students in crisis. There's only one staff member that's scheduled daily, and that's focused on students that are pose a possible threat of harm to their self or to others. And they permit clinicians to introduce interventions, coping skills, campus and community therapy options. To obtain a McKinley appointment for counseling or medication, you would call that number on the screen right there. And for medication, you would have to make an appointment with a primary caregiver. And for counseling, you could talk directly with the next available counselor. They have same day emergency consultations to students with urgent mental health concerns between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. They have over the phone consultations that are focused on stabilizing the current crisis or emergency. They provide immediate support to the student and link them to other services. And those usually last like 60 to 90 minutes, where you complete intake forms and discuss the reasons for the appointment to determine what services and resources will be helpful in the future. So as Rashmi said, if you are in crisis, call the Rosecrans crisis line as well. And that's just for after hours for students that are concerned that they may be dangerous to themselves or others. And they also have the dial-in nurse program at that number, which is 24/7. McKinley also provides psychiatric medication, but the primary caregiver may be able to prescribe and adjust needed medication. You need a referral from a mental health unit or from a McKinley primary caregiver, but the wait times can be weeks or months, and long-acting injectable psychiatric medications cannot be managed through McKinley, and they had to be established through local care or at home. But oral medications are readily available in the pharmacy.
Yeah, and that's another really important piece, Shivam, about like primary care physicians being able to prescribe medications. That's something that's kind of like we've seen kind of like a new shift towards that lately. So I would just like check in with your, because the wait times are absolutely crazy. So, if you're comfortable with your primary care physician, if you have a good relationship with them, and you're comfortable with talking about mental health concerns, then you could definitely talk with them about medication if you can't wait for an appointment with a psychiatrist. That's actually how I got my medication, was through my primary care physician. And of course, like mentality about SSRIs varies with each medical doctor, but since they are a medical doctor, they can prescribe psychiatric medication.
Yeah, to touch on a couple last things. For emotional support animals, you would have to go through the dress department. And McKinley caregivers can't write letters of support for support animals because it takes multiple visits to establish the need. Some caregivers may continue treatment for ADD with or without hyperactivity if the student submits appropriate documentation. But McKinley does not provide diagnostic evaluation for ADD and ADHD diagnosis. If a student needs campus support for the diagnosis, you gotta go to the dress department and call for assessment.
So a little more on the Disability Resources and Educational Services Department, also known as DRES. I kind of have bullet points about how to get DRES accommodations, but I'm going to kind of explain what DRES handles. So DRES handles handles, that's such a bad word to say. I am so sorry. DRES helps students that have disabilities, from physical disabilities to like educational disabilities or psychological disabilities. So obviously physical, you'd go there if you had a broken leg or a concussion or something like that and needed to take some time away from school or needed to use some accommodations like elevators and whatnot. The educational disabilities go along the lines of when you get diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. They help you get like test accommodations, assignment extensions and whatnot. And one of the cool things about DRES is they have the psychological disability, which can also get you a longer time on exams or extended assignment periods, or allows you to maybe skip, like take emotional health day if you need to. But that's mostly for like if you have depression, anxiety, any other mental disorder. DRES accommodations are really helpful. I have them and I found them to be very helpful. However, not every student can get DRES accommodations because it's based off of doctor's documentation. You need to have a doctor's note and like from the appropriate doctor. So if you're applying for accommodations for because you have test anxiety, you need a psychologist's note to say that this person has test anxiety. Please allow them to have extended times during exams and quizzes. So kind of going through how to get DRES accommodations. Again, you can apply online for these accommodations. The applications can be, what's up with me and like spelling things wrong lately? Can be found, not fund, on the DRES website, which I linked below at the bottom of the page. You need to submit documentation through mail or fax. Again, who faxes things these days? So basically your doctor, an appropriate doctor would need to mail a letter to the DRES office to kind of help you submit your application, and so they can better understand why you need those accommodations. Numbers and email address can also be found on the DRES website. Students are required to provide diagnostic documentation from a licensed clinical professional. Again, so you want to send in your application and documents as soon as possible to get the most out of your accommodations. It's your accommodation, you get a letter that you can send to each of your professors to say this student has these accommodations for like assignments, exams, quizzes, and whatnot. So to get that letter and to get your accommodations as quickly as possible is to send in your application and documents as quickly as possible, or else you won't have them as or you won't be able to utilize them as much as you want. The letters usually expire after each full term, so after each school year. It lasts from the beginning of the fall to the end of the summer term. Students with disabilities are encouraged but not required to register with the state rehabilitation agencies, the Veterans Administration, or similar agencies in order to obtain the full range of auxiliary aids and services to which they might be entitled. Again, numbers can be found on that website. Confidentiality is a high priority of DRES. When you are kind of when they accept your application for DRES accommodations, they will assign a counselor to you. You will have to meet with that counselor to begin with, to understand what accommodations can be made for your specific situation and what accommodations your counselor thinks is best appropriate for you. So it's not just like you can just ask for longer times for exams. You need to meet with someone and kind of discuss why you think you need longer time for exams. DRES is also where you apply for emotional support animal, said earlier on the McKinley slide. Again, it's also where you will like kind of talk to someone when you have a temporary injury, a broken bone, concussion, etc. So I put the link at the bottom there.
Yeah, so next we're gonna do a little exciting field trip on how to on how to find a therapist, because like Jackson was saying, there is a very limited scope of the counseling center, and so like you were saying, most people. I emailed Carla, the director of the counseling center, and she found that like most students have only 4 to 6 sessions, and I know a lot of people have very unfortunate experiences of kind of just being kicked out of the counseling center, you know what I mean, and kind of just like fetched to, or they're kind of forced to go seek outside resources, which is an extremely daunting thing, you know what I mean. It could be a really scary thing to go out, because you look online about like how to find a therapist, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many different ways I could find a therapist. This shit's overwhelming. And of course there's a lot that goes into finding a private practice, you know what I mean. You're like, all right, is this person going to be right for me? What the heck is going on with my insurance plan? You know what I mean? There's just so many things. There's so many things that that are at play here. So here, how do I get out of this? I need, I'm messing up. So there's this website that I know of. It's Psychology Today. It's a popular kind of like, I don't even know if I would call it a blog, but there's a lot of really interesting things. But they do have this database of accredited therapists, which is, and this honestly is a super cool tool. And so it's pretty intuitive, like find a therapist, right? That's something that you're looking for. Find a therapist. We can look in Champaign County. Like you plug in your zip code, you could plug in Champaign, Illinois, and it'll come up here. And it, of course, there's like a big list. There's a big list, but what I really like about this is the different filtering options. So one thing that you could do is you can highlight different issues that you're dealing with. If I press, if I'm dealing with something like grief, there are people who say, hey, I specialize in patients with grief. Let me clear the filters. And then a really important thing that I think is super important for a lot of people is this insurance feature. If you're aware of your insurance and you're aware of what your plan is, you can say, hey, I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and these are all therapists that accept Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. I'll just click on something. And so you go through it, it's a licensed social work. They list their credentials there. You can call them, you can email them. You could see where they are. And a lot of different practices have their own website. So you could also go to their website as well. And it shows what they deal with, what their specialties are, what the issues that they deal with. And this is also very important information about finances, because finances is a very stressful thing for a lot of people, especially when they're reaching out to therapy. You know, it lists the cost per session. Because if you're worried about deductibles and stuff, it'll show you how much you're going to be paying towards your deductible. And also, this is a really important feature here, is accepted insurance plans. And so it's kind of like a safe thing, and it's really good that you can filter it by, it's really good that you could filter it by insurance. I know actually that some of the therapists on this database, at least in Champaign, they say, yeah, we accept University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign student insurance plan. That's one thing that some of these people list on their accepted insurance plans. Shows you how long they've been practicing, and it's really just this holistic overview of what resources exist. And you could also filter it by ethnicity, sexuality, language, if you would prefer to speak to a therapist in another language, you can filter it through that. If you're dealing with some faith issues, or you want to have someone who's of a similar faith with you, you know, this is a very personalized thing. And you could also filter by price, what age you are. If you benefit from a certain type of therapy, then you can filter by that. And this is just a really easy way of finding someone. And, you know, if you're going to be reaching out to someone, we'll just say we're reaching out to Kevin, good looking guy. You know, just email, you can email them, say like, hey, you know, I'm starting out with this journey, and this is kind of like a similar thing to like calling the counseling center, to where it can be pretty daunting sometimes. So if any of you guys need any help with any of this, feel free to reach out to, you know, any one of us. If you need help like crafting an email or something, feel free to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we can kind of like help you through that. We can kind of help you guys find somebody that might be good for you. And also, sometimes they list that they offer teletherapy services, but actually there's this little tab at the top. If you prefer teletherapy, you can also search for different counselors that have teletherapy. You know what I mean? If you're not comfortable with going into an office right now, I know that I'm not, and so I would probably go for more teletherapy services. And you could still apply the same filters and everything. And you could even find psychiatrists, you know, and you could email them, say like, you know, what's your wait time, treatment centers, and then also group therapy. If you really like group therapy, you know, you could filter by the issues, and then you could be connected with people who are dealing with similar things in the community as well. So I highly recommend, you know, if you're looking for practice out there, if that's something that's been toying with your mind, of course, I encourage everybody to seek out mental health resources. And this, at least for me, makes it a little less daunting to reach out to those services. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm gonna see if there's any questions. Okay, cool. And I'm gonna move on from there. And also, if you guys have any questions about insurance too, I know a little bit about kind of what's going on with the UIUC health insurance, and, you know, kind of what applies to mental health or what insurance benefits apply to mental health resources. So if you have any questions about like insurance, you could reach out to me. And yeah, we'll move on. This is kind of a nice graphic created by Manmukti, and it's kind of like a streamlined way of finding a provider. You know, reasons to get help. If you have a reason, you know, seek help. And then they highlight a big thing on insurance here, because like we were saying, that's a big deterrent for a lot of people. You know, filter by in-network. We already saw that you can filter by accepted insurance plans, which would be which may or may not be in your own network. Yeah, you filter by ages, languages, faith, price, issues, filter by highest criteria. call the individual providers, you can email them. Are they available soon? Call additional people if they are, ask them to add you to the short list, and then schedule appointment. And really it's, it's from there, once you're in the system, it becomes a lot easier. Then you get into kind of a constant swing of things. You know what I mean? And, I wish that this graphic wasn't so large, because I think it's evidence of the complexities of a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? I wish that we didn't have to have this whole large thing, but we wanted this workshop to really be like, hey, there are some shitty things going on in there, but here's how to kind of really get access to a lot of these resources.
So we mentioned Rosecrans a couple of times. So I just want to give some information on it. It's a treatment center, and they have 2 locations in Champaign. I believe one is for adults and the other is for child and teen services. So they have that number right there where you could call and set up a meeting or appointment with them. And they also have that online submission form. That link will take you right to like their mental health section, like the forms right on the side, and you just put in, think of like name, email, insurance, and write a little message, and it sends an email to them right away. And then they have that number right there to schedule adult and child mental health screenings, and they would work to develop a treatment plan with you. And then they have that crisis line that we mentioned a couple of times, and then also a CARES line for anyone under 21 with Medicaid.
Sorry, I was muted. Another resource that luckily is always there for anyone all the time is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the Crisis Text line. So the number, of course, is right here, 800-273-8255. You can go to their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And as it says, it's a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crises or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But of course, people are often really hesitant to call this kind of thing. There's a lot of fear and myths surrounding it. So I just wanted to say a little bit about like what you could expect if you were to call this number. So there's really 3 steps to the lifeline when you call. So first, you're greeted with an automated message and routed to a local crisis center, which usually takes less than a minute, which is good. So you won't be sitting there for a long time. Then a trained professional or volunteer will answer your call, someone who really is going to be there for you, who knows about these mental health issues and are trained. And then pretty much the call just goes however you want, whatever suits your needs and will be comfortable to you. There is no set amount of time or certain information that you have to share with the person on the other end of the line. They can also help you help someone else if one of your friends or family members is in crisis. And lastly, a common reason for not calling the hotline is people don't want to lose control or get other people involved in their crisis, but only in really rare cases do the counselors have to call like a psych eval team or someone else to make sure that the person is going to be safe. Usually they're able to provide emotional support themselves and talk the person down a little bit.
So there's a slight trigger warning because I'm going to be talking about the Women's Resource Center, and I'm going to mention sexual assault, rape, and domestic violence. So the Women's Resource Center is a designated confidential resource related to sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, stalking, and abuse within a relationship, which is sometimes called dating or domestic violence. They have several confidential advisors that provide students, staff, and faculty who have experienced harm to ensure that you get what you need on your terms. And they use a survivor-centered approach to their work where empowerment is central. And all gender identities are welcome and able to receive any type of advocacy or support services, including their support persons. Um, Confidential advisors are not required to initiate a sexual misconduct report to the university or the police. So their services are available by appointment, referral, or just walk-ins, and they can be made over the phone or through email. So if you can't use, or if you cannot safely use virtual or like phone advocacy, but need help, they have these in-person services. Monday to Thursday, 9 to 5 at the Women's Resource Center. It's right on Green. I think it's in between McDonald's and Subway, I believe. So those, yeah, you can just go on a walk-in basis or make an appointment. Currently, they require a mask and no symptoms for COVID-19. And to schedule a free appointment over the phone, you could call that number and leave the limited piece of information. Just first name, a safe phone number to reach you, and whether it's safe for them to leave you a voicemail, and you'll receive a follow-up phone call within 1 business day. And to schedule an appointment over email, just send an email to that address right there, womencenter@illinois.edu, and request an appointment with a confidential advisor. And in that email, you only need to mention that you want an appointment, and you don't need to share any other details, as email isn't really a confidential form of communication. And they also have the races hotline for sexual assault issues and the domestic violence hotline, both of that number, and additional support services at wecare.illinois.edu.
Yeah, so while we're talking about resource centers, I wanted to go over the LGBT resource center on campus. And it's just one of the many like super helpful resource centers that we have. But yeah, I wanted to go over like specifically what they cover. So as you can see, I linked the services that they provide. Some of the key services are transgender and queer support groups. So basically what it sounds like, support groups for people of those specific identities to like listen, learn, discuss specific aspects of their identity with other, students going through similar things. And yeah, from the website, there is like an email you can reach out to get the location and time and specifics for those. They also provide like programming and events, and there are a lot of links to a bunch of different organizations that we have on campus, both like student run and just like school organizations. And there are like 20 of them at least. I mean, anyone who's been to a quad day knows how many clubs we have on campus. So there are quite a few of them dedicated to, sexual identity issues. The events, I'm not 100% sure what the events look like, but there is a link on the site to their calendar. And I'm sure that there's some really great stuff going on amidst COVID. And they also offer referrals to off-campus and all of the on-campus support services as well. So yeah, I think just calling the number or emailing them could get a lot more information, and just browsing through the site. It's pretty intuitive. And the last thing I'll say, and it's something I meant to touch on earlier about group counseling at the counseling center. They do offer identity specific group counseling. So this could include LGBT identity group counseling, but it also includes anything from like anxiety, depression, racial trauma. They have like countless different group counseling options. So I just wanted to plug that one more time. And yeah, I think that wraps it up for the LGBT Resource Center. But I would definitely look into them, as well as a lot of the other resource centers on campus. Like we didn't mention the like BNAC. I forgot what that stands for, but it's basically the African American Resource Center on campus, and I'm sure they have plenty of resources on racial trauma as well. So yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah, and so, of course, like I said before, this isn't like an exhaustive list. There are many more resources that exist, but these are kind of some of the more popular resources um, that exist on campus. And like we were saying, if you guys need any help, like reaching out to any of these, feel free to reach out to us, because we're your friends, and we always want what's best for you. You know what I mean? And like seeking out mental health resources can be like tough as shit sometimes. Like we all understand that it's a pretty weird process to go through. You know what I mean? So if y'all ever need like a friend during the whole thing, feel free to reach out to us. So we'll be sticking around at the end if any of y'all have any questions. But other than that, thanks for coming out, guys. And yeah, we hope you have the rest of the day. So if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. Thank you, guys.
I have a quick question for the Women's Resource Center.
Yeah, what's up?
You go like, okay, I know you're recording, but like I'm an open book, so I honestly don't care that much. My assault was 7